different. A lot of times I just start painting.
Okay.
Sometimes I work the ideas out ahead of time, but this one I sort of worked out ahead of time. I did a lot of work on the computer with the bending of the space. You know?
Right.
I didn't have a real clear idea of what I was doing with that.
Right. Are you familiar with Shirley Kaneda?
No.
Because she does she'll take photographs of the paintings she's done and then manipulates them in Photoshop and then prints that out and then uses that as a basis of a new painting.
Mm-hmm.
And it has some of this kind of effect that, you can kind of only get from the way Photoshop filters work, where you can sort of bend things, which I always have thought was a really interesting hybrid.
Painting like that, I just started with black and white stripes, just straight. And then that's all manipulated with different distortion techniques.
On the computer?
Yeah.
And then do you print it out? Or do you project it?
I project it.
Yeah.
For something like that's that complicated, I had to have it all figured out ahead of time.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so then when you're working into it, I mean, this is what I mean by the hybrid. We talk about this a lot at school, is that there's certain kinds of shapes that obviously their origin is from algorithms that are built into a computer program, and then there's certain kinds of visual information that only comes from the way that paint and brushes interact, which, is really beautiful, the way that's working with those gradations and the softness of the line.
Well, that's because it's all hand painted. Like I said, I didn't use any taping. Painting like this is taped, but it's got to be.
Right.
That one I wanted to be a little bit more softer and atmospheric.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah, all these paintings here represent like 3 or 4 different series that I was working on. So they're related, but they're not related.
Right. Over what period of time?
These have all been in the last maybe 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
Everything in here is in the last. That gray one is from 2005. You saw that in the last show.
Yes.
I wrote about.
Yes.
It was horizontal. I turned it vertical.
Oh, okay.
Back then I was using a centralized equilibrium in my composition, and I still do that. It's just running.
Yeah.
It's dynamic but stable at the same time.
This has kind of like a Leger kind of a feel.
I think I was very influenced by him, without trying to be.
Right.
Because people have said that before. A little bit of cubism.
Yeah. Okay, but you still have a pretty restrictive palette. It's just a different palette.
Yeah, I still use a lot of black and white.
Mm-hmm. Do you consider yourself to be part of this sort of Cleveland tradition that includes Julian Stanchak and Chasky? There's a whole lineage of Cleveland abstract painters whose work sort of moves in and out of pop art. Do you consider yourself part of that group?
Well, I've never really thought about that. I really like Stanchak, and I consider this like my own version of op art.
Mm-hmm.
And I did like, I don't know if you saw my show at the 1.6 or 8 gallery.
Yeah.
Well,
it was like 3 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's my version of op art. And basically, with those paints, I just started off with striped cloth, crumbled it, and then followed the lines. So I got a feeling of the linear part of op art, but it was all, those paintings were all hand painted. Wasn't doing any taping then, and so I sort of just fell into it.
Yeah. Do you have a preference with the tape or the not taping or not taping?
Well, I'm doing a lot of taping now.
It's always been
interesting.
interesting.
I wrote one very often.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's pretty much a quintessential art.
Yeah. So I'm very comfortable doing this too. But
Sure.
I'm also at the same time I'm doing this, I'm doing these other
Right.
paintings, which are abstract, they're not at all, but these are all tape, they're all small acrylic paintings.
Right.
And I just start painting, no pre-thought,
Right.
do a lot of changing, and then I zero in on
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so you've got a few different methods. Well, I think it's a really interesting thing that Cleveland has this lineage, and I don't know. I mean, I think a couple of local historians have focused on it a bit, but I don't know if anyone's really. There was a show at the Reinberger Gallery that included Julian and then Robert Mangold, who they were all affiliated with the Institute. Even though I think Mangold didn't quite belong in that group as much as I love his performance. Did you see that show? Because it was all geometric abstraction. And
But Vygotsky and Julian are much more, they are very, I mean,
yes,
Julian is on.
even though, right, but he doesn't like that term. Because he says, everything is optical. Why But, and also I think a lot of those artists objected to the term optical because it suggests that it's primarily about what's happening with your eyes, not what's happening with your mind, which is crazy. Because it really is about perception, and of course anything about perception is about how your mind works.
Yeah, but now it's just a style of art. And everybody, when you say art, most people know what you're talking about.
Right.
They like it.
Right. Yeah, I know. It almost doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But the reason I asked about the technique is, that group, the people that we now know as artists, all had very strong feelings about it. Like Julian uses tape, famously.
That's all he does. Yeah.
Right, that's all he does. But Bridget Riley, who is, does much more wavy lines, refuses to use tape. And I personally love tape. I use a lot of tape. But I like something that happens that I kind of play up that I don't think you would do. Is that little ridge that forms if you kind of let the paint build up against the tape. Then it becomes this 3D line. That it becomes a form that then when you sort of glaze over it, the glaze catches on that ridge. And I personally like that. That becomes part of the dimensionality of painting for me. But
Well, with Julian's paintings, where he does, where he has squares and things, they're actually built up, and you can physically see them.
Right.
So it becomes another dimension to them.
yeah, exactly. I like that. They even have a little shadow.
That painting's all hand painted.
Right.
Part of that is because to get all those curves, those tight curves, you can't tape them anyways.
Right.
It's too hard to tape, so it's easier just to paint it.
Right. But it's interesting how it has a very, very, very different effect.
But in that painting, I'm also doing shading. The shading is a part of it.
Yeah.
And when you're doing all taping, you can't really do the shading because the ridges get in the way of any kind of glazing.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's interesting that you move around like that. So what does remain consistent when you go from one painting to the next? Do you think you respond to the previous one and just try something different in terms of the color or the complexity versus some of the ones that have more of a centralized shape or singular dominant color?
I have no idea.
Okay. No, that's.
What I will say is I usually work loosely in series. Like these are all part of my monsters. Just for the simple fact that when I use these nuclear forms, I think like subatomic particles, and they can do whatever they want. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So that's how I got the term quantum, because I said, that's what it looks like something. So it's just a tag for when the like trails of electrons. And so that just puts them into a series. and it gives me something to focus on. You know, so I'm just creating a self-contained little space.
Right. And what are some of the other ones? I mean, if that subatomic vertical idea is one, I mean, some of them seem almost like a Mobius strip or some imaginary
Yeah, I have
plane.
one of the strips in that one over there.
Yeah.
And the third one in.
Right. That, and then you stop, so you have some kind of,
I have
they're sort of
also-
graphical representations of.
But I'm still doing machinery-based paintings. I don't know if you saw my show at Trigoni.
I didn't see it in person, but I
Well,
saw.
I have
some
a
of
whole
it.
series of paintings with gears and machine parts, and
Okay.
I started them a couple of years ago to see how I would do that kind of theme that I used to do a lot in the 80s.
Right.
And that's when those paintings were done.
I see.
And so they came out totally different, but
Right.
similar but different.
Mm-hmm.
And I find machinery very abstract and beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty much do anything you want with mechanical forms.
Right.
If you're just putting them together abstractly.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't include any of those in the show, just because there's not enough space.
Right. Well, you make a lot of paintings. I mean, what is your studio practice like? Do you just work constantly? I mean,
I work a lot,
yeah. I mean, is it a daily?
yeah, I do stuff every day. Yeah. I'm usually working on 5 to 10 paintings at once. When I'm working in oil paint, I have to do that because there's drying time.
Right.
With acrylics, you don't have to worry about that so much. But
Right.
last year I did a lot of paintings in acrylic, like that one and that one are acrylic.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only ones in this wall.
I see.
That's the only ones in here, but I have a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I still rub using oils, and I still love the smell and the feel of oil paint,
Mhm.
turpentine.
Yeah.
And